Okay, hello everyone. I am Debbie Fitzgibbon, and I'm pleased today to welcome you to our OTAP webinar series. And today we are very excited to welcome MikeMarotta. And Mike has been working in the field of assistive technology for well over 25 years now. And his experience revolves around a vast array of accommodations for people with disabilities and their family, their support members. He believes that networking and information sharing are essential for successful evaluation and consideration, implementation, and application of assistive technology. He has served as a statewide resource throughout New Jersey, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. He has coordinated repositories for information as well as online resources, wiki sites, and he has all kinds of experience in training nationally and as well internationally now. From his latest experience, he's been training in Qatar. So Mike is instrumental in training the next generation of service providers through his experiences in teaching universal design for learning and education throughout the East Coast. He also was a trainer for the Assistive Technology Application Certificate Program, ATACP, through California State University at Northridge. And that's where I first met Mike. I was in Mike's class through Northridge in 2001. And all of these years later, he still speaks to me. And I still call him friend, so we're doing something right. So Mike, without any further ado, why don't you come on and tell us about what's new in the iOS 11 operating system?
That sounds good. Thank you, Deb. Such a nice intro. Love a nice intro. Thank you. And it is nice to still be able to call each other friends after so many years. Such a nice thing. Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here with you today. Hopefully you're able to see the slide, which I do appreciate. And here's some other info. So stop muting me. All right. So if you want to reach out to me too, see how much fun you can have being friends with me. Oh, it'd be just a regular blast. Feel free. There's my email address. There's my Twitter handle. There's my website. I'd be happy to talk to you about anything. I'm excited to do this topic today because it's really, I love, well, you might not love it, but I'm sure you will. I love the first time I'm able to do a topic. This is the first time I've done a webinar on this topic, and it's exciting because it kind of forced me to take some time and dive deeper into this than I might have right away. This might be one of those topics that I would have kind of, over time, I would have poked around and figured stuff out. But this gave me a nice chance to kind of dive into it and really figure out what's going on here. So I hope that I can share some things with you today that you didn't already know. Questions? As we go through, it's kind of interesting. When I was putting this together, what I found was, and I'll have to admit, I've never gone to Apple's YouTube channel. I did now. And what I found is they had really great stuff on their YouTube channel. They had really nice videos, really well done, that really touched on a lot of the things we were going to talk about today. So it's kind of interesting. And when we get to some of the features that we're going to talk about, I pulled some of their videos in because I think that they kind of add to the conversation and something. Sometimes it's hard to get your iPad to project into the webinar as we go. So I did a lot of still pictures, and they add a little video to kind of see things in action as we're moving. But maybe you've seen this commercial already. I think it's worth playing because I like it. I think it's a great, I was so happy this commercial was on their website because I find this to be just a great kind of introduction to this idea of, in this case, they're showing the iPad Pro, but the iPad Pro and iOS 11, they're talking about this together as they go through. And so I think it's worth playing. It's only a minute long, so.
What did your mom say? There he is. doing on your computer? What's a computer?
I could listen to that just for the last 5 seconds. That's the part that really is great. This idea of technology, and it's such a great example of that young person using it and not thinking of the bigger kind of construct of computers and this and that. It's just a tool to move through her day in multiple environments, doing the tasks she needs to do, to whatever, be connected. And I thought it's really interesting. And some of the features that she showed in that are things that we'll go through and we'll look at with different pieces of iOS 11 as we go through. But I thought it's kind of a nice wrap up. I love that commercial. Every time that comes on TV, I kind of smile. That one makes me laugh. Let's start at the beginning. First things first. Are you even able to update to iOS 11? This is one of those moments where we start thinking about the tools we have and the end of life for some of these tools. And that is a situation that gets a little touchy. If you have a first generation iPad or a second generation iPad anymore, guess what? Those things are not able to update anymore. If you have an iPhone that's older than a 5S, guess what? That doesn't update anymore. You can't get iOS 11. And so we're starting to see this, and it's interesting because I just had this conversation in a school last week. This idea of our tools can't work anymore and do some of the things we want them to do. We can't get them to update to the newest version of apps. We can't get them to update to the newest iOS. And suddenly we're having schools really having an issue with this, with the technology they have. They put this money out and they're not ready to give these tools up yet. But with that said, it's a conversation that we have to have. I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know where your devices fall on this list. I have an iPhone and 2 iPads that I can't update anymore. They've fallen off this list. So they are no longer able to be updated to the newest iOS. And so all of these features that are actually really good and actually give us a lot of flexibility for the people we're working with, we can't have it anymore. And so it's a conversation. It's a conversation for technology as we go through it and thinking about how we spend our technology money and how important these things are in order to ensure that the people we work with are successful in whatever. And, I think I'll cut across the whole conversation of adults, children, school, work, home. I'm going to be all over the place. So as we go, think about that from your perspective, from the people that you serve and work with. How would this change impact them? How would these features work for them? And I'll try to be aware of my examples that I give as we move through to make sure that I'm giving examples that are broad in their scope. But it's something that we definitely have to think about, how we're going to use these new features. So let's talk about what's new. And as we go, and I just saw the chat pop up and someone had said, can we share the presentation? Oh, yeah, you certainly can. You can share it through the link. Actually, I had just tweeted it out before too. So yes, please feel free. The presentation's out there that you could have the pictures from it and see what it is. So let's talk about what's new in iOS 11. Some of this, and this is part of the fun, and Deb might laugh when I say this, part of the fun of me is it's a bit fragmented and a bit disjointed, but it all is going to come together in the end. So that'll be fine. But it's like, as like anything else, when I was putting this together, I'm like, ooh, that's really cool. Oh, I want to tell people about that. Oh, I love that. And then I tried to organize it into some kind of pattern. We'll see if I did a good job or not. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So let's talk about some of the things that have changed. Some of the biggest things that have changed in the control center, how we get to some of the functions of the device. And what's interesting is that they've changed the way this looks. And in fact, it works differently on the two devices. On the iPad, it works and you have access to one chunk of information. And then on the iPhone, you have access to most of the same information, but it works a little differently. But here, kind of the basic idea of what we're talking about here with the control center. This, to me, is one of the bigger changes. The idea of how you get to the control panel, the control center, as well as the access to what tools we can get to in the control center. And so as we think about this idea of, and by the way, since I didn't say it in that last picture, sorry, the control center are all those little bubbles of features. So as we look at it from the iPhone on the right, the iPhone, when you swipe up from the bottom of the screen, it fills the entire screen with your control center. So all of the pieces of information that you need quick access to pop up there. Your Wi-Fi, your data, if you're listening to something, the other features that you have, screen mirroring, all those pieces will pop up there. On your iPad, when you swipe up, you still get the control center icons, so they'll always be on the right-hand side of the screen. But in the iPad, on the left side, you'll get all of your open apps. So that becomes your app switcher. So when you get to this screen, you see all of this information. So a little different. But what's really kind of cool about this, here are all the bubbles. So we'll call those bubbles for now. Here are all the bubbles you can put in the control center. And so there are lots and lots of features and functions of your device that we can get to quickly without having to dive into the settings and go in and find them through settings. That's the nice feature of this, is that how it's opened up this kind of quick access of using some of these features. Oh, I was just in the chat. I just got sidetracked, and someone said all the Mayor Johnson apps no longer work. That's a huge issue with iOS. See, and you guys are already doing a better presentation than me. That's always the first thing before you update to iOS. Any iOS, take a second and visit your websites of some of your apps that you use frequently and make sure that they're going to work with the update. I know when we do this for consumers' devices, whether it's their phones or their tablets, my usual first suggestion to them is don't do it right away. Wait a little bit until you get a sense of if some of these things are working, to know that the apps that you're going to do will work. At least sometimes it's just wait a day. How many people, the minute the iOS update comes out, they frantically download it and put it on without knowing what's going to work or what's not going to work. So take some time and think about that. But that's a really good point, whoever said that. But yes, Deborah, good point. So as we think about the items that are in the control panel, here's the list. What I find when we think about looking at this update and how it impacts us when we work with individuals with disabilities, look at all of the settings that could be considered accessibility settings that we can get to right there. I mean, think about that I don't have to go into the settings icon anymore. I don't have to go into accessibility. I don't have to dig down to get to some of these. Look, they show up right on my home screen when I swipe up. I can get to my accessibility shortcut. I can turn on guided access. I can do the magnifier quickly. I can adjust the text size of things on my device. These are things now that I can get to and activate, turn on and off, adjust, whatever it is, without having to go into my device. That, to me, is a nice addition. That's an addition that you wouldn't normally think of as an accessibility update, but in my mind it is, because it's given us such quick access to all of these things. The other thing that we got, I don't think I can talk about this enough. And I'm somebody who does a lot of presentations, and I do a lot of sharing information with teams. So I do a lot of tutorials. I do a lot of things like that. And they have built into, in iOS 11, the ability to do screen recording right on your device. So now what you can do, if I need to demonstrate to someone how an app works, I can record that right on the screen of my device, not only with the system sound. So say it's an app that gives me sound back. Maybe it reads, perhaps I'm going to show someone how VoiceOver works, something like that. So you're going to hear sound from the device. Not only can I record these screen captures with the sound from the device, but I can also turn on the microphone so I can narrate it at the same time. And it's built right in now. I mean, anybody who's done tutorials before this, you know the drill. You have to connect your device to a computer somehow and then record it off the computer, whether you use something like Reflector or one of those tools. I mean, that's the one I always use, where I can wirelessly connect my iPad to my PC and then I record it from my PC to make these little videos. Well, now we don't have to do that. It can happen right from the device, and that feature can be right in your control center. You can turn that feature on so that it shows up right in the control center to start your recording. As soon as you're done.
You can share it right away?
And you could share it right away, sure, because what happens is you make that recording and it drops right into your photo app. And then all you do is share it. You can share it with someone. You could airdrop it to someone. You could put it up on a website, whatever you were going to do. Quick, easy access to these little screen recordings. So when I think about this update, that to me is one of the biggest ones, just because it met a need that I had all the time for when I was using this for presentations. But it's a great little addition, little added feature. If you want to get to the control center, I thought I would give you some screen captures of how to get there. So if you went into your settings, one of your choices is control center, and then you can adjust it by clicking on customize controls, and it opens up a whole side panel. And then you have the apps that you choose on the top, and then at the bottom you have more apps, and you can just click them and they will drop from one list to another. So under more controls, I can click any one of those and it will drop up to the top and be shown on my home screen. So you think about that as you start to set this up. Think about what the individual needs access to. It's a great conversation piece to start talking to the person and saying, what do you need to do quickly? And then start customizing that list. Because quite honestly, there's a lot that shows up on that list. I'll go back to the list for a second. There's the whole list. Now, I look at that list and I go, well, yeah, a lot of these things are great. I have an Apple TV. I like the accessibility settings. I like all that. I don't have any of those on mine because I don't use that from my phone. So I didn't turn it on. But as I went through that conversation, I know that there's a lot of people I work with who I would turn those on instantly. Oh, so Kristen is sharing her little thing. She shared it with me privately, but I'm going to share it with everyone. Is that okay, Kristen? I'm going to hope you say yes. So Kristen did some screen recordings, and when she shared it out, thank you, she said I could. The audio and video were not in sync. That's interesting. That's really interesting. What I would try is I would try to make sure everything else on my device was turned off. So make sure all your other apps are closed. Make sure nothing else is running. Make sure that you're connected to a strong Wi-Fi signal, just so your device is not fighting to try to connect the whole time. I wonder if that was part of it, because I haven't had that experience. That's interesting. Kristen, one question. Are you on an iPad Pro, or on what were you on that you were doing that on? Because I know that on mine, and I'm vamping until she types. On mine, I use an iPad Pro. And a Pro. Okay, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Kristen, that's interesting. You saw my contact info. It'll come up again. Shoot me an email and we can keep chatting about that, because that's an interesting one of why that didn't work. I know that as you go through, I know sometimes that my Pro has done little weird things every once in a while. I'm going to call them hiccups at this time. But, make sure that you've updated to the most current operating system patch. So make sure as they send new updates out that you've done it. Make sure those other apps are closed. I always go with the standard, and you can never go wrong with this. Turn it off, turn it back on, and then try again. You can't go wrong there. She's going to send me a recording so I can check it out. So that's cool. Yeah, we'll see what happens. It's really interesting. Some of those things, that can be a huge advantage for us as we move forward. If you're making a lot of these videos, I mean, I must spend large chunks of my day when I'm in a school working with staff, showing them how apps work. And it only takes about 4 or 5 times before I realize, you know what, maybe I should just record that and then just send it to them so I don't have to show 5 people the same exact thing. So thinking about that as a way you could use this support to give you some control over things. Sorry, I clicked with my clicker at the same time. One of the other things that's changed has been Siri. So Siri has had some little changes now. You have one of the big things that's in there now, which they have put in as an accessibility feature, is the ability to type to Siri instead of ask it a question out loud. And so there was some concern, and it's interesting, I read some blog posts about this by individuals who are visually impaired, that they would like to be able to ask Siri things privately instead of having to say it out loud. And so this is a nice option that's there all of a sudden. So I can turn that on, and when Siri pops up, I can type. A box will pop up that will let you type into it, and then you can have the response back. So that's kind of an interesting little additional feature, and that did show up in the accessibility update. So the Siri piece that's now added into accessibility. One of the other things, and again, I'll show a little video to see this in action. This is kind of cool. Siri now does language translation. Not a lot of languages yet, so it does 5, and you see them on the screen there. French, German, Italian, Mandarin, and Spanish. Those are the 5 languages it translates to. But what's interesting, and then I'll let the video play for just a couple seconds, is that you can ask Siri, how do I say blah, 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 whatever it is, and then choose one of those languages. And it will pop up with both the text, so it will show you that text in the language, and also read it aloud to you so you can hear it spoken. So I'll give you kind of a sense of what that sounds like. I'll only let this play for a second. Well, maybe more than a second.
iOS 11 Siri is getting translation support. Right now, it works for just 5 languages. You can translate from English into French, German, Italian, Mandarin, and Spanish. This only works one way for now, so you can't translate from those languages into English, but for a first start, the translation seems to be pretty solid. All you do is ask Siri to translate into the language you like and follow it with a word or phrase. You'll then get a translation written out as well as audibly, and you can replay it if you'd like. Translate into Mandarin, I'm going to go eat, then I'm going to go shopping, then I'm going to go home.
我要去吃饭，然后我去购物，然后回家。
How do you say goodbye in French?
Au revoir.
How do you say where is the library in Mandarin?
图书馆在哪？
How do you say goodbye in German?
Auf Wiedersehen.
That seemed like a good time to turn it off. But you get kind of the sense of how that works and the support that can give. That's really interesting. And so what we heard from the little video, and what's important to take away from that, is that this is one-way translation. This is not a back and forth. So it is English into those 5 languages, not those 5 languages into English. So keep that in mind. But I'm sure, like everything else we see that are these web-based supports, the Siri is technically a web-based support. You need to have Wi-Fi, you need to have data in order for Siri to work. That is something that we'll see a lot of change. We'll see a lot of growth there, which is exciting. That's interesting. We see that if we wanted to step out of the iOS world for a second and talk about Google things, we see Google doing that with their new Pixel phone, where you use the Pixel phone and their earbuds, and their earbuds will translate languages as well using Google Translate. So we're seeing this as a big area of updates with both of the main manufacturers of our mobile devices. So as we continue on the world of iOS 11, it finally happened. You finally got it. You got the ability to manage files on your iOS device like you do on a computer. You got something called the Files app, which is a big moment. I wish I had a trumpet sound. That's what I should have had right there. because what we had previously was no centralized structure to organize files. And now we do. Now, what's interesting is it's not every app. So that's important to know too. This is a feature that the app companies have to build into their app so it will work with this file structure. But for some of our, our apps that we use a lot, we'll see the features. I can go to the Files app now and search through my Google Drive files and move them around. So now I have the ability to see my files in Google Drive and say I could move it to my iCloud drive just by drag and drop. And so now we're starting to get a little bit more of a file structure. And I think as we go, it's another one of those areas that I think we've gotten the app now. We've gotten this function. I'm curious to see where this goes and how it continues to change and how we continue to be able to push the envelope of making these mobile devices a little bit more computer-like. If we think about it, from back to that first video, you think about that idea of the young lady not thinking of her iPad as a computer. But for some of us, I'll throw myself in there, we grew up on a computer. The computer had a file structure to it. For some people, that lack of a file structure makes using a mobile device difficult. And so now this starts to bring that functionality in where we start to get the ability to move things around. And you might say to me, well, Mike, is there a video for that? Yeah, there is. This comes from the Apple YouTube page. And I'll give you a sense of how they're moving it around. Oh, this is such a great question that someone just asked. Can you pull books off a VoiceStream reader, and are those files stored in the Files app and no longer in VoiceStream? I don't even know. Oh, that's such a great, and while the video is playing, you're going to watch me. I'm going to try to do that while you guys are watching the little video because that's such a great question. Watch the video of the person moving files around, and then I'll actually look and see what the VoiceStream does.
Monitor your files using the new Files app. What you'll need: iOS 11 and an iPad. With iOS 11, your stuff is all in one place. Just open up the Files app. Now you can manage your most recent files and folders, or you can browse through all your files and folders.
Oh, that's so interesting.
You can even make and manage favorites, drag and drop files, or even access and search your files from a bunch of different cloud services. Then just tap the file you want to open. No big deal. And that's how to manage and fly through your files using the new Files app.
Okay, and that gave me just enough time to play around with it while it was doing that. And what I found, whoever had the greatest question ever, congratulations. You don't even see. So the comment was you can't get to the books in the Files app to access them. VoiceStream Reader doesn't even show up as one of the options. So I was looking through my list of locations that the File app will know. And what you find is that VoiceStream is not even one of the options that comes up under locations. I can't add that into a list. So this goes back to this thought of the app manufacturer needing to make their tool accessible to the Files app. So at this point, we won't be able to do that. But I can tell you what's interesting, and it's one of the apps that I use a lot too. In addition to VoiceStream, I use the Claro PDF Pro app a lot, and that does give me the ability to move things in and out of it, which is kind of exciting because I use that a lot to navigate through PDFs with some text to speak. Yeah, and so someone has said they added it into Files, and I'm not seeing how it's adding in. It's not even giving me the option to do that. So this will be good. Now it's your turn. Whoever just said that. I'm sorry. Who am I
That's
talking
our
to?
friend Britton.
Okay, Britton. Good job. Now this gives you something, Britton, to work on while we're talking the rest of the way. And you bust in and you tell us how to do it. And my iPad's sitting right here. I'm going to add it in as we go because I think that's a great tool. Yeah, the Files app is a really interesting one. And I think talk about one that's going to continue to evolve. That is definitely, we are seeing that right now in its first incarnation. I know that's going to get much better, and you know that that's going to change. And so that's a really exciting option. Good. Just going to work on the flow right now, the workflow. Good job. I like that where people are working while I'm doing stuff. That's even better because we're working on this together. This is awesome. So let's talk about, those features that we talked about. We looked at it from the concept of how we interact with these devices and provide support to the people that we work with. What about true updates to the accessibility features in iOS 11? And what we found is there were no new features, that's for sure. So we didn't get any brand new accessibility features. What we got was some updates and some added features and added functionality into some of them. So as we go through, just a reminder, go to settings, go to general, choose accessibility. That'll get you there as we go through. And what we found, here's some of the things that changed. So the magnifier changed. Didn't really change as much as they improved the ability for it to see in different lights. So as you move from light to dark, dark to light, and even if the file or the material that you're scanning is darker or lighter, the camera is more responsive to pick that up and adjust it quickly. And so what we've seen is that while the magnifier, not necessarily new, it has been updated and its functionality is a little smoother. And so that's a good thing. One of the other parts about magnifier, remember, that's one of the pieces that now can be added into the control center. So you can drop that onto your main screen and have access to it quickly to turn it on and off. Usually the only way you could turn that on and off was to add that as an accessibility shortcut and do your triple click to get to it. But now we have that where we can add that in and actually see it as one of the little bubbles to choose from in the control center. One of the other things, we got a couple choices, a couple different things added into the display accommodations. So when you go into accessibility, search under magnifier, somewhere around there, you'll find display. We got something under invert colors. Now we've always had the ability to invert the colors on the screen. And so you'd have that quick ability to everything that was light becomes dark, everything that was dark becomes light. So you have this flip. But what we found is that a lot of times the invert would make seeing some items on the screen more difficult, especially pictures and things like that. It would invert the colors on a picture and make it harder to see. Now we have something called Smart Invert, where if you activate that feature, the device will invert your colors, but on those types of items on your screen, it will leave them alone. And pictures are a good example of this. So it will invert all of my settings and my screens that I go through to get to different pictures, but the pictures themselves, it does not invert the colors. It will just leave them so I'm able to see them. And so that's kind of interesting, where it picks the way that it inverts the colors on some of our choices. We also got auto brightness, got added in as an accessibility feature. So this hasn't changed. We always had auto brightness. What's changed is where it lives now. Now it lives under accessibility. So that's where you go to find it at this point, under your display accommodations, and it shows up there. Okay, so not new, but just moved. And now, oh, here it is, it popped up. We got one additional feature under speech. So we've always had the ability to speak selection, speak screen. So you go in and you turn that piece on, which is great. We've always had the ability to highlight the content as it's reading, so it would scan through and it would read. One thing we got now was the ability to choose the highlight color as it reads. And so that's another added feature into an existing accommodation that we already had. So it's made it a little deeper, and it's given us some options. We have default, and then the whole entire list of colors you can choose from: blue, yellow, green, pink, purple. You can choose those. That would be your highlight color as it reads. So that was one change we got in speech. That was probably one of the few actual changes we saw in accommodations. in the accessibility piece. VoiceOver has changed a bit, and what they've done is kind of massage some of the features and given them a little more usability. How about that? I'll put it in that way. So this whole idea of VoiceOver reading to us all of the content on the screen, giving us a screen reader component that goes through everything. What they have added is that VoiceOver now has the ability to detect text in a picture. And so if you're on a screen that has a picture with text in it, if you're browsing the web and there's a picture with text in it, VoiceOver should recognize that text and try to read it to you, which is a nice little additional feature that we got in VoiceOver. The other thing we see in VoiceOver, a lot more depth of what you can choose. So they added in verbosity and all of these pieces of how I can tell VoiceOver to work for me, from everything from speaking the detected text, so that's what we were just talking about, punctuation, any hints that pop up on the screen. You'll see there's something in there as you move down into that second grouping that talks about capital letters. When something's capitalized, I can now ask it, or I can tell the device, you can either speak the cap or sound a tone to let me know that something was capitalized. That's a little different in kind of the readability of the information as it goes through. So that's one thing that changed. Some of the other things as we go through, I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, so we have the ability now of having it speak out embedded links, looking at some of the media descriptions. We can turn that on and have it read as it goes through and give us some of the additional information with closed captioning, and then you can have an option of how those descriptions are shared with you. I'm just reading the list to make sure I get it right. You can have the option under media descriptions for speech, braille, or speech and braille. So as you go through, if you're using a braille display and you want to get the media description sent to the braille display, you can choose that now and it will send that information instead of reading them out loud. So again, just some more flexibility, some additional support as you go through. And you see the emoji is there, speaks the word emoji when an emojis are read in the context. So there you have that too. That might be important for some people, but that's another option there. So we see a little more of the depth of the customization in this area in VoiceOver. And again, the feature itself obviously was already there, but they've added some depth to it. These are a lot of the features that are in the Mac, and they've brought them over onto the iOS. So that's what we're seeing, is a lot of these verbosity features that are brought over. So here's a fun part. I like this. I'm calling these accessibility features, not really, but really. They're not in the accessibility feature setting, but think about how we might use them to support someone, and they become kind of accessibility settings. And so we start with, this is interesting. I didn't even know this was in there until I read this on a website. I was like, this is great. You now have a one-handed keyboard option for your on-screen keyboard. So if you have someone with a physical disability who struggles on some of the larger devices with the keyboard that spreads across the screen, you have the ability now to shift that one way or the other on the screen. So you can tighten it either left or right. And so that's an option now. Now, you'll start to see some of the differences with some of these features. So this one-handed keyboard will not show up if you're using an iPhone 5S or an SE. You won't get that feature. But on every other device that was on that original list, there you go, Kristen. That's such a cool little feature. This idea, and you think about it, our phones got bigger. How many of us try to text with one hand and it just doesn't work sometimes for what we're doing because our phones are too big? Now you can adjust that and get that ability to switch it over. So that's one of our features, the one-handed keyboard. Some of the other ones we get, so we've had this feature already. So we've had the reader view. So you go to a website, you select reader view if it was available, and it would visually clean up the page. So on the left shows the regular website that I went to. That was ESPN. On the right shows me the reader view of that. So what it did was it stripped out a lot of the other visual clutter on the screen, columns and headers and menus and all of that stuff. And what did it give me? It gave me the picture and the article. What's interesting about reader view now is we have an option in Safari to go in and set that and set automatic reader view. And what you can choose is you can choose to have certain websites automatically change to that view. So you see the two choices that have popped up there. It said, do I want to use that on ESPN.com every time I open it? Or do I want to use that on all websites? And so if I choose all websites, if that reader view is available, my device will automatically change my page to that view when it shows it to me. So that was kind of an update to the reader view. Reader view is not listed as an accessibility feature, but for a lot of people we work with, that is an accessibility feature that they use. The other thing, and I don't know if anybody's found this as you've been playing around, when you take a screenshot, you now have the ability to mark up that screenshot with pens and colors and circle things, and you have the ability to annotate that page now. That pops up automatically. So now you have the ability to do this before you save a screen capture. So if you're taking pictures of an app to show someone how it works, or you want to highlight something, say you got some notes or you're on a website or you got an email and you want to write yourself notes, you can do that by taking a screenshot and then mark it up with your finger, with an Apple Pencil, with a stylus, whatever you want to do. And now you can save those marked up versions of those pictures to your photo roll. So now you have that ability. That's a nice little additional. Again, not really an accessibility feature, but for someone who needs some direction as we're going through and we're taking these pictures, that could be a really nice feature for them as they go through. I like these. These are the fun ones to kind of dig these out and kind of think about how we might use these as we go forward. And so we have a new piece now, iPad storage. When you go into your storage to see how you're doing with space, and we're running out of space and we're trying to clean out apps, you have the ability now to offload apps that you're not using a lot. And what's interesting is you can go through and pick and choose apps that you want to get off your device, and you don't lose all of your app data. It keeps your app data, but it gives you more space. And I think about this sometimes for some of the apps that we use with individuals where the apps are very large. Sometimes the files that we use are very large. And if they start running out of space, we could start to move these apps off their device and then bring them back on when we need them. I have a college student I work with who pretty consistently runs out of space on her phone. And what we were thinking about doing was offloading some of her apps that she uses for school in between the break, so she gets that space back on her phone. Now, of course, the conversation had to happen that, okay, that's fine. We can do that. And it'll give you more space for the month you're off in between classes. But when you go back to school, you're going to need to put that app back on your device. We recognize that, right? And so we had this conversation about app storage. But it did come up because some of the apps that she was using were taking up a lot of space on her device. So something to think about. One of the other things, your camera got updated. Your camera got updated. You didn't even know it. Your camera now on your iOS device is now a QR code reader. So you can take a picture of a QR code. You do not need any other app at this point. When you take a picture of a QR code with your camera, it will automatically pop up and ask you, do you want to go to this page or whatever it is that it's connected to? So that's built into the camera now. I know a lot of us use QR codes for things. I use that a lot for quick links to get someone to information they need, whether it's directions on how to use something, whether it's video tutorials. Remember all those video tutorials I make? I attach QR codes to them a lot so people can click something and get to them automatically. Now they can do that right through the native camera app on their phone. They don't need to have any other app.
That's pretty cool.
About some updates. here's an interesting little piece, is that there are updates to iOS 11 that are only relevant to the iPad. So there are some that cross, and the ones we looked at kind of cross across both. You'll see them in both devices. But the iPad itself got some updates that are different. One of the biggest ones that happened was the ability to get more stuff on the dock. How about that? So the dock on the bottom of the iPad now has the ability to hold up to 13 apps. You can have apps there on the left side of it. Those are your apps that will pop up all the time. On the right-hand side can show you some apps that you've recently opened. So you have kind of this quick access into some of the apps on the right side that you've opened and get to them quick, so you have access to that. So that's kind of interesting, this update to the dock with all this extra stuff on it. So I'll pass on this video because basically it's another Apple video that just shows what the dock can do. One of the interesting pieces about the dock is that if you're in an app where the dock is not there, you can swipe up and the dock can pop up. Actually, I just talked myself into showing it. Look at it, just like that. I talked myself into it because it does show you. I'm going to play the video low just so, because I want to just show you all right. This is one of those I'm impatient about. I just want to show you this one cool part. So you can customize it, all that great stuff. What's interesting, especially if you're using the iPad Pro, is the ability to be in an app and launch another app in the side panel so that you can have them both at the same time. So you see what happens there. The person brought content in from another app and just hovered over an app on the dock. In this case, it was the texting app, the messaging, and the messaging app popped open and they were able to drop the picture right in it. So now I'm having a little bit more flexibility. So that's kind of a nice thing, and the idea of being able to pop things open from the dock and access them quickly. It's a nice little feature of that dock. Oh, this was, I jumped ahead because this was the video I wanted to show you, which was the multitasking one. And now I'm stuck in the chat. I'm reading something about offloading an app. Oh, that's a great question. It's Brayton again. Great question. If you offload an app, and if you're in a managed system, will you easily be able to get the app back? That's a great question. And I have no idea. I haven't tried to do that. I'm not trying to rub it in, but I'm not on a managed device. I'm running my own device here. But that's such a great question. I don't know. My suggestion, because I don't know how that's going to work, especially because you have a system in place that's managing how your apps come to your devices, I'd try it. Well, don't try it right this second. Oh man, she's trying it right this second. I'd try it when I had access to the tech person who's able to put it right back on for me. My fear is you'd get rid of it and not be able to get it back quick. But if you have that person kind of floating around, or you can corner that person and say, I'd like to try something real fast while we're here, and try it with them there, that'd be interesting. Well, you have access to them. You're driving crazy already. Perfect. I'd do it then. Go crazy. Do it. Because I'm curious how that would work. So I think it's a really good point, is what happens when content and materials and apps in this case are pushed to devices, and devices are managed so you don't have as much control of how you run them, how you interact with them to delete and to do all those other things. So that's a great question. You guys have awesome questions tonight. Thank you. That's really good. Here was just this was the one I didn't need the sound for, but this idea of multitasking with the iPad Pro, this whole idea of being able to open two apps at the same time. And so now you have something where the app's open, I pop open the dock and I can slide another app to the side of it. And there's that beautiful two app at the same time approach to using the iPad that we had been missing for so long. And the iPad Pro had brought it to us, this idea of being able to have some apps that open simultaneously. Now with iOS 11, they've updated that a little, and now you start to see some of these ways that we can start interacting with these at the same time. So it's been kind of another addition to the multitasking feature that we had gotten previously. So you're seeing that the functionality of that's being added to a little bit more. Kind of a nice thing. So that's your multitasking. Again, only on your iPad Pro, the multitasking. The app switcher I mentioned before, so when we pull up to get to our control center, the app switcher replaces the kind of deck of apps that you have open where you go and you sort through them. So now all of your apps pop open in kind of a little card view, and then you can just swipe them up to get them closed and to move them out of there. So that's kind of your new way that your apps show up on the iPad. So the question was, can you multitask apps in guided access? My guess is no, but that's just a guess at this point. All right, I'm going to turn on guided access. No, it didn't let me do anything. No, so it didn't work. So I couldn't even get the dock to pop up. It won't even pop. It's basically a dead spot. It's a dead zone on the screen. It won't give me any of the functionality. Now what I wonder is if I
Give that Mike a challenge and he's going to see it to the
I'm going
end.
to just stop the whole webinar and just play. I wanted to see if some of the buttons had changed to where I could set the buttons, but no, I couldn't. No, so I'm going to think no, that's not something we can do now. But that's a really good question, though. It's a great question. I like these ideas. These are how we might use that to start modifying how we access. Can you multitask and then put them in guided? No.
These Oregon peeps, they're thinking.
Oregon people, you guys are all right. Let's see. Let me find something that I can open. I'm trying to get to two things that I can open at the same time. And I meant no insult either. I was just going to call you guys all West Coast people and just leave it pretty broad. I still might do that anyway. Let's see. So if I open that, two apps and the ability to use guided access. When you have two apps open side by side, guided access doesn't even come up as an option because it knows you have more than one app open. So it doesn't even let you activate guided access. So the guided access piece went away from my accessibility shortcuts because I had two things open. Great question. That's an awesome question. Oh, we're learning so much about it tonight. This is good. So here's some resource. Oh, wait, we'll put a link up. I tried to compile as many resources as I could find when I was doing this, pulling this together, and I dropped them on my website. So there's a link to the page on my website. So please feel free, go there. Yeah, and someone had said, Aaron said, we already need a new update. Yeah, we need them to update that already. We need to change that. Someone asked if how they could watch the videos again. The link that's been on every slide, and of course it's not on the one slide I want to talk about it from, but that's okay. There you go. The link on the bottom of the slide brings you to this Google slide presentation, and then all those videos will play. So if you want to watch the videos again, go back through and watch them, especially the ones that I kind of shortened and I just talked over. So all those videos will play. And in fact, the one video I didn't play, because it's very long, but it's very good, is the video on the voiceover page, which is excellent. And goes through all the features and shows them all working, but it's a really long video, so I didn't want to play it, but I wanted it there so you guys could have it. That's why the picture was there. So all those videos will play if you open them back up.
And as far as the webinar recording, Carrie, I see your question about the video, but the webinar recording, you're going to be able to bring that up again and share it, do some PD with it. It's going to be housed on the OTAP webpage, and so you'll be able to share it with everyone there.
Perfect. I'm going to leave up my contact info because I saw the answer to our voice stream question, and I saw it was really long. And I don't want to miss it. All right, so let's see. Select locations on my iPad within. Oh, you actually, so as you went through, you actually got it to pop up on other locations. Mine didn't even show me that. I'm going to have to play with that. locations on my iPad and then go to choose the other files. When I click on Voice Dream Reader, it brings me to more subfiles, one being library. When I click on library, I have files. I have the files with the book. But my question is the file actually stored outside of the Voice Dream Reader and within the file apps itself? No, the file is still in your Voice Dream Reader app. The Files app is just showing you those files around. Now, if we start to move it, that's interesting because the Files app itself is doing nothing more than just showing you the content on the device. It's not actually housing it. Like your apps are not putting their files in the File app now. So when I'm in Voice Dream Reader, it's still saving my files in Voice Dream Reader. The Files app is only giving me a place to see all the files. So that's one thing about the Files app. Oh, so then the follow-up question is, so I am confused as to if it is safe to delete the Voice Dream Reader app. No, I would not delete that because the files still live there. If you wanted to gain some space, what you could do, and I'm curious if your files would still be there, this might be something to play with, not on the device that has all the files, but maybe try it somewhere else. Offload the app, which will keep the files. So the files, in theory, should still show up in the Files app if I'm understanding the way the Files app works. Because even when you offload the app, it still keeps the app data on your device. So I would think your files should still be there. But that is really a guess. I'm being brutally honest there. I don't know. That's a guess. But really, that was really a good question. Thank you for doing that and for playing with that. I'm going to try to figure out why mine's not working and showing me that. But that's awesome. So you guys have my contact info if you want to reach out at any point. I'm game. Ask me these kind of questions. Deb knows I'll sit here all day and play around with stuff like this.
Give him a challenge and he'll stay off task on anything else until he finds your answer.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And every other task I was working, that's right. Every other task I'm working on goes right out the window until I figure that out.
We do have something in common. Well, you know, I invited Mike to come here today to talk about the accessibility and the changes in iOS 11. And this is something that each one of us, if we set aside time, we could have probably gone out and done something similar to what Mike did. Look at the videos and all. Yep. But this, in having a webinar, we've got Mike, who is an expert in all things technology-wise, and he does enjoy the challenge, and just sitting here and closing the door gives us a chance to focus and talk about these things. So you no longer have to look for time to investigate it. Mike has done that for us, and he brought it to us in only a style that he can do. So if I sound like a fan of MikeMarotta, I will be at the head of his fan club line. So yes, I am a believer, and I'm happy that you are all able to join us today. Keep your questions coming. Keep your enthusiasm coming. And what we don't have answers for, we'll make sure that we do get it for you. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. As I said to you just a week or so ago, I always gain something new from listening to you and from watching you, and I am thrilled that you've been able to be here with us today. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Have great holiday seasons, and look for an announcement for Mike to be here in person. Anybody who wants to be a heckler, you can get front row seats and keep Mike on his toes.
That's right.
So again, thank you all for joining us today, and give us your feedback. If you want more of the same, please let us know, and we are happy to bring it to you. Everyone, see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See ya.